All right, we spent quite a bit of time, okay, absolutely intentionally, we weren't killing time this morning, trying to lay a foundation for the search for truth. Because one of the most important things is we've got to understand that in this discussion, we hold the high ground. We do not have to apologize. We are seeking truth. Okay? We don't have any vested interest in this other than eternal life. Okay, all we want is the truth, and that's all God wants us to have. Now, we looked at that little list this morning of the things that are true about truth, and we won't go back again. One of the key points is truth never contradicts other truth. If it does, we don't panic. We don't panic. We just say, something is misunderstood somewhere. Okay, if two truths contradict each other, then one or both of them is what? Wrong. Is wrong. So we just keep looking. We just keep looking. All right, there's a place in the Bible where God gets really upset, okay, with people who pose bad logic trying to help God. What's that book? Job. God does not need the help of well-meaning people who think that if they fudge the information, that they help God. All right, that has happened many times, okay, all right, in this discussion. Okay, now we don't need to feel too bad because we haven't been as guilty as the other side. Okay, the other side that wants to deny God, okay, they're bald-faced about saying we're going to gather information that supports, all right, our view, and we'll change it. We'll fudge it. We'll hoax it. We'll try to blow it by people. We should never, ever do that. There is nothing wrong in this discussion with saying, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that question. Yet, there is an answer. We'll keep looking for it because we have no other motive than to find truth. Now, all right, we looked quickly. We've already seen this one. Right, but the sound way to look for truth, okay, is scientific method. Science is not the enemy of this whole discussion of apologetics, and science is not the enemy of God. Not truth science. Okay? Faulty science certainly creates problems. Okay? Intentionally biased science creates problems. But honest science that seeks for truth never conflicts with real truth, either in the Bible or that we see in creation. All right, so when we go through this, all right, this is how we arrive at true things. This is how we've done many impossible things that we talked about this morning. All right, God has let us do that. All right, somebody think, why is it exploding more now, all right, than it did 50 years ago? All right, why is knowledge and progress, okay, in impossible things now being accomplished, all right, in the same way as it was being done at the Tower of Babel? All right, what one creation? Internet. The internet and the computer. Okay, in the old days when people in science were looking for truth, this is the way it worked. In the great universities of the world, some graduate student who wants to get a PhD or a master's degree in the days when you used to have to write a master's thesis, they went to their committee and said, okay, I want to get my PhD, I want to get a master's degree. Well, you got to write a paper. And it's got to be on something important. It's got to be something new. Okay? So this young person dives into research, dives into experimentation, writes a thesis, writes a dissertation, and they're right on the money. They hit a home run. He's German. He submits it, okay, to the university. They approve it. He gets his PhD. Where does his dissertation go? It goes into a library.
German library.
Goes into a library in what language?
German.
In German. And it sits. tremendous parts of the science puzzle were buried in libraries until 20 years later, some other young graduate student does what? He's doing a dissertation, and he's doing research, and he's looking for a part of the puzzle, and he finds a piece that another guy figured out 20 years ago. And it opens his research up, and he makes a quantum leap, and it goes into his dissertation, and then where's it go? It goes back to the library. Well, all right, today, all right, and the only way the German copy ever gets to Cambridge, okay, to an English student, or to Stanford, to an English-speaking student who's on the same trail, the only way it ever gets to him is what? Somebody's got to translate it, or he's got to learn that language. Now, all right, the computer and the internet has just about ripped down those walls. Okay, this information, this search for truth is just accelerating at just an incredible rate, because this process is much faster, and we don't have these barriers. Now, if we go to, let's see if I do this. Would I go up or down? All right. Now here's what we're trying to do whenever we look for truth. You always make a declarative statement. It's never negative. The non-existence of anything cannot be proven. I want you to remember, don't ever try to do that with anybody, because you'll lose. All right, there's no way to prove that there's not a giant purple people eater in this room. There's no way to prove it. All we can do is look and search, and at the end of that, we can say what? We didn't find him. We didn't see him. All right? All right, so these are always positive statements. All right, now by definition, all right, an hypothesis is an educated guess. Okay, there's some kind of rationale that causes you to say, you know, I think this might be the answer. We don't want to stay there. Now, if we gather some evidence, we may get enough evidence to say, this looks like we might be on the right track. All right, this hypothesis may be true, but we haven't got enough evidence for it. Now, where we want to get is we want to get to a fact or a law. We want to get to a fact or a law, because a fact or a law is supported by 100% of the evidence. Now, all it takes to kill a fact is one piece of verified, incontrovertible evidence. One piece destroys it. I could frame somebody in here for a murder with 20 pieces of solid evidence. But if you could prove you were in California when it happened, what happens?
Falls apart.
Falls apart. The case is dismissed. We want to keep in mind, okay, that as truth seekers, we have nothing to fear from seeking truth and letting truth do its work. All right, we actually know very little. Okay, that's truth of the matter. All right, how many of you knew you were going to get here tonight when you got in your car and left the house? You didn't know it. Why'd you come?
Thought you might.
All right, you didn't just think you might. What'd you think?
Just
You believed you would. Why?
The odds were good.
The odds, okay? Now, when would you have stayed home tonight?
Tornado.
Report of a tornado.
flood.
All right, why do I come down Farm to Market 2130, which is about 19 feet wide with a bad shoulder on it, okay, and I meet semi-trucks and oil rigs all the time coming at me at 70 miles an hour, and I pass them 3 feet away, and I do it all the time. Okay, many of you do the same thing. Why do you do that?
Because it's always worked.
You don't know what's going to happen. Why do you do it?
You believe that he's going to stay in his lane and you're going to stay in yours.
All right, you believe that you're going to make it. Is that a rational belief?
Yes.
Why?
Having those.
All right, what are your assumptions? What are your assumptions?
He's gonna stay over there,
You're assuming he's going to stay over there. Why?
because he's assuming you're gonna stay over on the other side.
He's not homicidal. He's not suicidal. He's not drunk. Okay, in the left-hand corner of his windshield, there's what? It's an inspection sticker and a registration. What's in his pocket? There's a driver's license, which means he's been through driving school, which means he hasn't had it revoked. All right, so you live by faith. Are you always right? Absolutely not. Every day, people get up and get in their cars and go places that they assume rightly they're going to make it there, and they don't make it. Every time you eat out by faith. What is your faith? The food's going to be safe. The guy washed his hands. He doesn't have hepatitis. He doesn't have this. The food wasn't left out. They didn't park chicken over the top of it and let it soak down on the food underneath it. On and on. You don't know the food is safe. All right, how many recollect about 25 years ago the Tylenol disaster in the Northwest? People went in, innocently bought Tylenol, took a few of them, hit the floor. They were poisoned with cyanide. They died within seconds. Somebody had sabotaged that. Everybody expected that medicines would be safe. Okay, was that a rational decision in the 60s? Sure it was. But suddenly, our faith was eroded. What gives you faith in your Tylenol today? Got all kinds of little glue-on tops and things that even people in their 60s can't open, even though they're child-proof. Okay? All right, does it guarantee you that the Tylenol is safe? You still believe it's safe. Some maniac in the plant, before the batch was ever capped, could have put in those things. All right, we live mostly by faith. All right, so one of the first things to keep in mind as we go through this is rational faith is not about 100% certainty. It's just not. It's just not, and it's unfair to apply that standard, okay, all right, to a belief about God, okay, or God's will. All right, to say, I can't answer every single question, so I'm going to chunk the whole thing. All right, that is dishonest intellectually. So keep that in mind. Don't let anybody ever put you in a box, okay, that if you don't have every answer, then your belief is false. All right, we mentioned this morning. Okay, there's no place in the world where you can go and study electromagnetic law. All you can study is electromagnetic theory. I can do 2 sets of experiments right here before your eyes that prove to you that light is a particle. Okay, that it's a little bundle, that it's a little particle of energy. We call it a photon. I can do a set of experiments that prove to you it's a bullet. I can do another set that prove conclusively that it's a wave. What does that tell us about our knowledge of light?
It's limited.
We don't know any light law yet. We don't. Because, all right, can it be a bullet and a wave? Probably not. All the geniuses of the world who study it say, if it's not one or the other, it's got to be what? It's got to be something else. There is a truth about light. There is a truth about light. We do not know what gravity is. Okay? We don't. We've got a formula for it. We know how to measure it. We haven't got that figured out. Don't ever let anybody trap you into saying that if you can't answer every question and if you don't have a rational, okay, reproducible law to apply to it, okay, that your belief is invalid. We do not live that way. Nobody lives that way. We live by what is reasonably expected. Okay? And that is a sane way to live. We are not cuckoo. We are not backward. We are not ignorant, because we live by faith every day and we apply the same standard to our belief in God. Now, all right, when I say most of what we think we know, we actually believe, that doesn't mean we're not right. A lot of things we believe we're right on about. Okay? Or we're chasing the truth very closely, and that is the only sane way to live. That is the only sane way to live. Now, when do we reject some things that we believe? When we get evidence that blows them up, then we walk away from them. We don't have to be embarrassed about that. We don't have to feel stupid. We don't have to feel that we have failed, because the search for truth is an honest process. Now, to end up what we did this morning. There are consequences to our decisions about what is true. Suppose you're wrong about Santa Claus. Suppose there's not a Santa Claus, and you think there is. Is that earth-shaking? It's not. It's not earth-shaking. You're just deluded. You're just in la-la land. You're just, okay, whatever. Doesn't hurt you, doesn't hurt anybody else. But if you're wrong about God and His will for your life, what's at stake there? Everything. Everything. Okay, now they told me to close this out. I hate these little mouse pad things that they have. Where's my little cursor?
Versus on the other screen.
Oh, there it is. There we go. I think if I do this. Okay. All right, now we're going to go on to the second area. All right, now we're going to look at some of the evidences for God. Now this is a whole semester, 2 semesters, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD field. Okay, so it's wide open. We're just going to try to hit some high points. We don't have time to do but one of these tonight. All right, these are what are called the classical evidences for God. Now, okay, I intentionally use the word evidence and not what word? Proof. All right, that's a bad word to use. It's a bad word to use, because there are some things, okay, that we can know things about, that we can live our lives by, that we can't prove. It's absolutely true. And one of these things is going to be God in the flesh. Jesus in the flesh. Or who are the only people who ever had that opportunity?
People that live with Jesus.
People that were there during that 3-year ministry. Or we throw this term around a lot, a personal relationship with Jesus. What's the only sense in which we mean that? Spiritually. We have not sat down and talked with Him. We have not asked Him questions. We have not seen the inflections in His voice. We haven't seen His body posture. We haven't had Him react to us. All right? That kind of personal relationship with God and Jesus was reserved for very, very few, and awaits us where? Okay, and it's a very difficult thing to even contemplate, isn't it? We are all going to be in the presence of God someday. Now that's like these silly ads that I can't stand, where these people, blue top of their hat blows off. Okay, you see those? Oh, there's an ad on TV where somebody, poof, their head turns blue and it blows off the top. Being in the presence of God, okay, is going to be that kind of an experience. Okay, all right. In the Bible, when people thought they were in the presence of God, where did they go? They went right to the ground. They buried their face in the ground. And these were pretty good people. These were people that were on good terms with God. But all right, when we talk about building a rational faith in God, all right, don't let people put you in a box about, well, you can never fully know there's a God unless you have a personal, flesh, touch him relationship. Okay, that is nonsense, right, in the context of this argument. Now, not going to spend any time with ontological evidence. It's pure philosophy and Descartes and Pascal and all these guys that sat around and talk for 30 years about whether we're real or not. It's got a point, but it's so vague, I'm not even going to deal with it. There's cosmological evidence. Cosmological simply means look at the universe. If you just look at the universe, you don't look at your Bible, you don't look at anything else, you just look at the universe. What's the evidence from the universe that there must be a God? Now tonight we're not even going to talk about which God. We're not going to talk about how many. We're not going to talk about whether that God is a he, a she, an it, a group, a force, a dark side, or what's the other side? Now what's the dark side on Star Trek or Star Wars? The Force. Okay, the Force is a good side. Okay.
Good side, yeah.
All right, we're not even going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's the evidence that there has to be something bigger than us. Okay.
Because everything works.
That's what we're going to look at. Teleology will start tomorrow night. That's the study of purpose and design. Okay, it's the study of, all right, does the universe look random and chaotic, or does it look like somebody planned it? That's going to be evidence. We're looking at that tomorrow night. We're not going to have time to get to historical evidence, and because our God we mentioned this morning is really the only God, okay, who makes audacious claims about knowing real people in real places and doing real things. That's a very risky thing to do. Why? It can be checked out. That poor guy that lost the #1 football position in America 5 or 6 years ago at Notre Dame for a simple omission, sort of. He claimed what? Claimed he had a degree. And somebody who didn't like him said, you might ought to check on that. All right, when you claim that you have done things in real places with real people, all right, that's a very gutsy move. There is no other faith who has a God who has claimed that. Okay, all right, there's a subsidiary of our faith that claimed it, and everything he claimed was totally debunked. You remember who that was? Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith claimed a revelation about a bunch of people that came across the Atlantic in a submarine, and God didn't put a breathing hole in it, and he finally got there, and he had all these fights, and he fought all over South America and fought with all these kings, and what? Zero. I remember this morning, we didn't get to this. I asked you, do you believe in Abraham Lincoln? Do you believe that he existed? Do you know it? You don't. It could all be a fabrication. It could all be a hoax. Why do you believe that it's not a hoax? It's on your $5 bill. It's on your penny. You've been to Washington, D.C., you've been in the memorial, you've been to his log cabin, you've read his books, you've seen some photographs, and the rational mind says to you what? It is irrational to believe that an entire country participated in a hoax to convince us that a man named Abraham Lincoln lived. Now, it's a little different about, did man walk on the moon and come back? You absolutely do not know if that's true. You absolutely do not know if it's true. All right, how many of us believe that it did happen? I do. Okay, I believe it happened. But that one's way up there. How many of you remember watching the moonwalks? And sometimes you saw real film, and sometimes in the upper right-hand corner they had to type in what? Animation or dramatization. Anybody ever done done any research on the conspiracy people who don't believe we ever went there.
True.
You ought to go look there. There's things about the flag is pointing this way, and there's no wind on the moon. There's things that the shadows are going in two different directions at the same time. Okay? All right, that easily could have been faked. Now, again, most rational people say there's enough evidence by a broad spectrum. Okay, if that had been a hoax, eventually the cat would have got out of the bag. Okay, so we accept that. So historical evidence is a great thing. When God says there's a Jericho and the walls fell down and it happened about this period of time, and that so-and-so was king of this place in this year and he came down and fought a battle here, that can be verified. Now, moral order is another way. Okay, this is looking at the existence of morality in all cultures. That's going to be evidence for God. There's also the evidence of religious experience. And the last one, which may often be the most powerful but is probably the least useful, is what? Personal. But for how many of us is it very powerful? How many of you are convinced that God has acted in your life? Okay? Can you prove it? Do you know it? Some of you say you know it. Most of us say you believe it. Why? Because you have no other good explanation for it. Is that stupid? Is that wishful thinking? Is that fantasizing? It's not. So all those things, okay, are in what are called the classical evidences for God. But I want to look at the ones that are empirical, that are scientific first. They do not involve subjective or an application of my own wishes or my own emotions. So we're going to look at cosmological evidence. Now remember, I've got something new here, but I don't have anything on the screen. Maybe I just touched, no, that doesn't work.
Can you tell us how it works?
Just gonna have to come
Like this morning?
We're going to do resume slideshow. No. All right. I get it. That's what I want. There we go. All right. Now let's remind ourselves. Do not burden yourself that you have to have 100%. All right, when you serve on a jury, what is the level of confidence they expect you to have if you're going to vote guilty? Beyond a reasonable doubt. A lot of people think it's beyond a shadow of a doubt. That is not so. That is not so. Now they up it for one crime. For one crime, it has to be unanimous vote. What is that?
All of them have to be unanimous.
All right, that's a capital. Okay, bad term.
Unanimous is everybody has to
Standard.
agree or disagree, or you have a hung jury.
Well, lower courts, you can be split. You can be 8-4 and petty jury and some of those kinds of things. You don't have to have 100%, do you?
In any felony case in Texas.
Okay, felony cases. Okay.
Civil suits you don't, right?
What?
Civil suits is.
Right. All right, you do not have to say, I've got to get it perfect. We don't live that way. We've already proved that. We make decisions about what we think we know based on what is reasonable. But a reasonable and logical belief and an appropriate course of action based on the evidence. Now, what we're going to look at, I'm going too fast. Cosmological evidence is the empirical, observable, measurable laws and actions of the universe and the world around us. We do not want feelings. We do not want guessings. We do not want hypotheses. We want to look at things that have, right, that have been established by science as law. All right? Now, here's the first one. The first one is the law of conservation of matter and energy. This is the one that is expressed in this way, which is, okay, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And stated in words, it says matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only move from one state to another. Now what this says is that the universe, the total amount of matter and energy, is a constant. That's a law. That's not a theory. That's a law. That's a law. It does not make any difference that we have no idea how big that is. We haven't been to the edge of it yet, and we haven't seen the edge of it yet. All right, we're never going to. Why?
It's infinite.
All right, the nearest star is how far away light speed?
9.5 minutes.
Okay, it's about 8
8
minutes.
minutes.
The sun. The second one, okay, you got it. The second one is 4 light years away. Okay? All right, we can't travel even close to the speed of light. Okay, in spite of warp speed on all of your favorite shows, we will never go warp speed. It's a physical impossibility because according to this formula, in order to go the speed of light, you have to have an infinite energy source. What's the problem with that?
Doesn't exist.
The universe is, it is finite. This is what it says. This law says that the universe is finite, and by definition, it says what? It could not have created itself. Now, unless we're all nuts and we don't exist, okay, if we do exist and we did not create ourselves, what is the only logical position? Someone, something, some group, some force, some coalition of gods, somebody created us. We don't know who. We don't know who, but that's irrelevant. Okay, that's irrelevant. If I come up and there's a guy laying here dead, he's been shot. And somebody said, wow, he's been shot. Well, we don't know who did it. He's still what? He's still dead. It does not make any difference that we don't know who killed him. He's dead either way. We know that. We don't know if it's a man or a woman, boy or child. We don't know if it's a rage. We don't know if it's a robbery. We don't know it. That's irrelevant. All right, this first law says the universe could not have created itself, and only an illogical person. Okay, I hope you read this because this is kind of a sweet background to keep from a guy who was not a deeply religious man. He was a God-fearer. He was Jewish. He wasn't a practicing Jew and wasn't the world's greatest guy, but he believed in God. He said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. All right, he absolutely believed that truth could be found. And of course, he phrased it a different way when he said, God doesn't play dice with the universe. Now that should remind you of a verse in Hebrews, which says God is not the kind of God who does what? Changes his mind, reverses course, is undependable. Now, what this says is, now, by definition, where does that something else have to be?
Outside the universe.
It has to be outside. Now, you only have two choices when you get to this point. You can either say the universe came from something, or the universe came from nothing. Which of those two makes no sense? No scientific sense whatsoever. This one makes no sense at all. Now, does that solve all your problems? It doesn't, because what's your next question? Where does something come from? But what's important as we look at God, all right, God is going to answer that question. He's going to make a bold claim. He's going to make a bold claim, but he does not expect us to accept an absurd claim. Okay, when people who don't want to believe in God, they admit that these are laws, but they say, even though those are laws, at the beginning, for no good scientific reason, they say what? It happened anyway. Okay? All right, all the scientific evidence says it's not happening now. It's never happened before. But suddenly they say, well, probably it happened once. And that's what gives... Now, is that rational? That is not. It is not rational. Now, this all by itself is one of three things that we're going to look at tonight. Okay? Or we go till 7:45. We can take a break if we need to. All right, the first one says that the universe is finite. Okay? Do not ever be intimidated by someone saying, but we don't know how big it is. That's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. You don't know how much I weigh. About what? Okay, I'm here. If we bring in a scale, okay, it'll tell us. I don't know how much all of you weigh in here altogether. That's irrelevant. Okay? The same thing is true about the universe. The universe, the law says the universe did not create itself. Okay? And so all of the things that you hear postulated about how it might have happened, they require scientists to ignore a what? A law. We are not the illogical ones when we say the universe had to be created by something bigger than it. It could not have created itself, so it had to have been created by something else. Now, let's go to the next one, which is one of my favorites. The second law of thermodynamics. It's also called the law of entropy. Everybody in here can understand this. This is not rocket science. There are some rocket scientists in here, but this is not rocket science. The matter and energy of the universe are proceeding inexorably from a state of order to disorder, a process called entropy, to a state called maximum entropy. The universe is coming to a stop with no available energy for actions. This is a law. This is not a theory. Now, we can demonstrate this a lot of ways. All right, at the moment, what kinds of energy are being applied to this fishing sinker?
Potential.
What?
Potential energy.
Okay, there is some potential, and what's that? What force is that tied to? Okay, this is lead. Okay, gravity is on it. What other force is on it? My hand? What about this? Mechanical force of the string. Okay. Now, I've done this with a bowling ball in a gymnasium with my science classes. And I get them on a ladder, and I put the bowling ball right here. I've never had a kid, even though I taught them the second law of thermodynamics, I've never had a kid that could do what? Stay there. It is an absolute law. It is an absolute law of science that if you take a bowling ball or a 500-pound wrecking ball and you hang it on a virtually friction-free swivel, and you let this go, and you put their head in a vise, and you let it go, when it comes back, it cannot come back. The reason is that all the energy transformations in the universe are degrading. Okay, energy is becoming unavailable. Now we have to be careful because the first law says the energy cannot be what? It can't be created or destroyed. It can become unavailable. And the whole universe is slowing down. The Earth has been spinning for a long time. The Earth's spin is slowing down. Everything is slowing down. Okay, the energy transformations on the sun. Our sun is a middle-aged star. Stars start out as huge masses of what gas? Hydrogen. Huge gravitational forces compress them, and compresses them to the point that nuclear fusion starts. And energy transformations take place when that happens because it's a giant hydrogen bomb. It's a continuous hydrogen bomb. The sun is not burning. It's not on fire. It's a continuous hydrogen bomb. And the hydrogen is turning into helium. It's being compressed. Okay. Young stars are mostly what? Hydrogen. Old stars, mostly helium. And stars go through a life cycle. First they're little masses, then they turn white, and then they become what we have is a main sequence star, a middle-aged star. It's kind of yellow. Then it swells up to a red giant. It will swell up and be bigger than the distance between us and the sun now. It will swell out to us and burn us up. And then it will collapse into a white dwarf. That's what's happening to everything. This is a rechargeable battery. People would say it's what? We call it what? Okay, when it's not working anymore. It's dead. All right. It's not dead. It's got all the electrons in it it ever had. Okay, now that's a whole side thing. We don't even know if there are electrons. There's a big argument. How many of you were taught this fib in school? I'll make this a helium atom. How many of you were taught that fib when you were in school? You probably were still taught it in 9th or 10th grade. That's the Dalton model of the atom. That was suggested in about 1910. 1910. It was a theory. It's called atomic theory. Well, how many of you have seen this later generation fib? How many have seen that one? Okay. You were taught that there were three particles in an atom, right? Protons and neutrons in a nucleus, electrons running around the outside. There's actually 100. They don't run around in little orbits like that. We don't think. We don't even know what's going on really with this electricity here. We don't know if electrons even exist. We don't know if electrons are actually running through the wire or if they are like a bowling ball when it comes up out of the ground. What does it do when it comes into the rack of balls? This one hits this one, hits this one, hits this one, hits this one. How many of you have one of those cool little steel ball things at home that you drop one on this end, you drop it. Or a lot of people think the electrons don't go anywhere. All they do is bump along. We don't know the answer to that. But all around the universe, energy is being degraded and it is going to come to a stop. The second law of thermodynamics says that the universe is not eternal. It is not going to keep going forever. Now, suppose, I ought to give $1 for whoever can first guess this song. All right, now what I did just then, okay, was I created a closed system of energy. Now, where did the energy come from that let me store energy in this? This is mechanical with my bones and muscles. How do my muscles work? What kind of energy? Chemical energy. Where did the chemical energy come from? Came from the food I ate. Where'd that all come from? The sun. Okay, the sun is the engine that drives all the energy transformations on this planet except nuclear. Wind, sun, plants, everything. So I put some energy in here. That's from Born Free. Everybody know Born Free? Story of the lions in Africa? Now, all right, what is that music box doing right now that the whole universe is doing? It is winding down. Now, I'm going to let that go for a while, just like this is still barely swinging. Okay, if I had that on a longer deal and I had, you know, something with WD-40 on there with some ball bearings, this thing might swing for an hour or 2 hours. Doesn't make any difference. You know it's going to what? It's going to stop. It's not a theory, it's a law. The universe is going to stop. Now, if you walked into this room and there was nobody in here and that thing is swinging, what would you not say? What would you not say, logically? It did not start itself. You'd go look around in the windows, look out the doors, you'd look in the closet, and somebody would say, well, it just happened all by itself. And you would say, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. All right, you would know that it's going to stop. Everything in the whole universe, has to obey this law. Let me see if I can do this without making a mess. I almost couldn't get this off today at home. That'd be embarrassing. Okay. All right, here's one of the best ways to demonstrate the law of entropy. Well, that's a fairly clean bottle, and that's green dye, so I'll see if I can get this going. All right. Now, I have just created a closed system. Now, one of the simplest ways to remember science from now on is everything in the universe proceeds from more to less. Everything in the universe proceeds from more to less. Excuse me, from more to less. It's all headed toward what? Equilibrium. The whole universe is headed to a stop. There is only one way to change that. What has this reached? This has reached equilibrium. Is all the energy destroyed?
No.
No. But the energy I put into that spring, where'd it go? It went to turning. It went to friction. It also went to sound. And the energy is dissipated into this room, into this. Some of the vibration went in here. But some of that energy that came from the food I ate, that went into this arm, that caused me to turn that up, energy is constantly being degraded. The universe is going to come to a stop. That is a law. Anything that has an end has a what? It has a beginning. The second law affirms as a law, we're going to add this over here. Where's all my stuff? I'm getting panicky here. Where's my eraser? There it is. The first law said to any honest, logical person that the universe is finite. The second law of thermodynamics says it is temporal. In other words, it's bound to time. Therefore, the second law adds to the fact that the universe is not only finite, it is temporary. It is not eternal. Now, therefore, just like a finite universe had to be created by what? Something bigger than it, perhaps infinite. We're still speculating about that. We're not worried about that now. But we know whatever it is has got to be bigger than it. Whatever it is has a different formula. You can go to Princeton today and look in the door of Einstein's teaching room. on the chalkboards, the chalk is still there. He spent the last 25 years looking for the formula for who? God. He said there's another formula. God does not have to obey this formula. Why not?
He's outside
He
it.
designed it. He's outside it. All right, he's not limited by time and space. He does not have to obey these rules. All right, this is why almost every good science fiction movie series of the last 20 years has included a God. All right, for you Star Trek Trekkies, who is he on Star Trek? Q. Who plays God, and he drives them crazy. He drives Picard crazy. Why?
He can do anything.
He doesn't have to obey the rules. And he comes down and he acts like a Greek god. What do Greek gods do?
Fiddle with
Middle
it.
and-
They just fiddle with man. It's a puppet show. The second law says that the universe is temporary. It is not eternal. The very same scientists that will say, well, we know the universe couldn't have created itself, and it's not creating itself, but it happened once. That's irrational. Well, all right, when you look at the evidence, the law evidence of science, okay, that the universe is running down, is going to come to stop, it had to have a beginning. It had to have something outside of itself that started it. Now, all right, we are approaching, I don't think, we're not quite there yet.
Not quite.
Almost. It's getting slow.
All right, let's go back this way, wait on that. All right, this is a storage battery, like it's in your car. Your car battery does not make electricity. Does not make electricity. It's got the same number of electrons in it as when it's dead. All you have to do to cause anything to move in the universe is create a what? A more and a less. And everything goes from what? More to less. All right, now there's no such thing as cold. When you sit on the commode seat in February, which way does the energy flow? Which way does the energy flow? It goes from you to the seat. It goes from you to the seat. When does it sort of feel comfortable? When it reaches equilibrium. Okay? Now, all right, here's your car storage battery. When it's dead, it's not dead, it's full of electrons. But the trouble is, you've got what? You've got same. What do you know is true about my two arms? They're putting out the... Now what are they doing? What's my right arm doing? It has become the more. What's this? Now what? Okay. All right, there's no mystery to watching the weather. They show you a low in El Paso, okay, and they show you a high over in Oklahoma, which never happens. But which way would the wind blow?
To the west.
From Oklahoma to us. We live right in the middle of the Mexican high. There's a high pressure in Mexico, there's a low in Oklahoma. Which way is the wind blow? Goes from southwest to northeast, and where are we? We're right in the middle. See, there's no mystery to this science. Now, what happens here when you start your car, somebody gives you a boost where you had the same electrons here and here, what do? You send them back over here, and now you've created a what? And now you've got a less. And now when you turn your key, what happens? And in between, you make them go through your starter. That's all there is to it. Now, this law says that the universe is not eternal. It has not always been here, and it will not always be here. It is not self-perpetuating. It is not self-created. Those are laws. We are not the dumb ones. We are not the ones who turn our back on truth when we say the evidence from the cosmos, from the universe, asserts there has to be something out there. Now, let's look at the third one. And there are loads of these.
Your water has reached an equilibrium.
It has. Now, what's the only way I can get this water to move? Because I've got same, nothing's happening. We can leave this in here until Jesus comes. And if we put the lid on, the levels are not going to what? They're not going to change. But all I have to do is now I've destroyed the what? The equilibrium. And now there's more pressure on this side because it's from a higher level. And now it will run, if I leave it about right there and wait a while, but I can come back here and I can do it the other way. What's the only thing that's going to change? What's the only thing that's going to change the length of time that this universe lasts? What's the only thing that can affect that? God would have to come along and do what?
Good change.
He'd have to add some more energy. He'd have to put in some more energy. Okay? All right. The second law says then that the universe had a start, that it is running down, and that it could not have started itself. Okay? Now, if you want to say, I think it started itself anyway, that's your privilege. But you got to admit what? It doesn't make sense. It's illogical. It's illogical. Now, everybody has the right to be stupid. They do. But you don't have the right to be stupid and say it's smart. You don't. All right. There is only one logical and reasonable conclusion. The universe was started by something or someone who was not bound by its laws. Okay? At this moment, it doesn't matter that I can't tell you who that would be. I wouldn't get that information from the universe. Why not?
It's outside you.
All right, that's specific information that requires intelligence and words. Now, we're going to get to that, but not here, but we don't have to. All we're trying to look at, what's the scientific evidence that there has to be a greater power that is infinite and eternal? And the answer to that is there has to be. It does not matter that I can't fully explain that to you right this second. It's irrelevant. The facts speak for themselves. Now, let's go to the next one. The law of causality. All events have a cause, subject to the laws of relativity, the law of conservation of matter and energy. These events are caused by transfers of energy which are themselves governed by Newton's laws of motion and the second law of thermodynamics. Therefore, nothing just happens. Okay, now that is so obvious as to be almost insulting to bring up, and yet people will argue against it. The only reason that you would argue against something is absolutely plain in scientific law is that you've made up your mind ahead of time. Now, when you do that, you're not searching for truth. You're not searching for truth. Okay? Now, we Christians don't have to do that because we don't have to know all the answers. We have to know enough of them that it makes it reasonable for us to take a step of faith. We talk about this, a leap of faith sometimes, and that sounds real good in the sermon. I mentioned this morning that God never asked any of his people to have blind faith. God always told them to go on his record. Go on his record. All right, why was Jesus disappointed? He wasn't angry. Why was he disappointed in Thomas's answer?
Didn't trust what he'd already experienced and seen.
Absolutely. In other words, all right, if Jesus had just yanked some guy off the Sea of Galilee and said, I just rose from the dead, that guy would have every right to say what? I don't believe it. That would be a rational thing to say. Why?
Because it violates all the norms.
It's never happened before. It violates every known rule and every experience I've had, and so I'm going to be rational and I'm going to say, I don't believe it. Thomas had seen the dead raised. the lame walk, the blind to see, all of that. And so Jesus did not ask him to make a leap of faith into the absurd darkness. Instead, it was based on trust. How many of your kids would jump off the upper bunk for you to catch them when they were 2? Why?
They trust you.
Trust you. Suppose I let him hit the floor twice.
They don't do it a third time.
Did you ever tease your kid once and do that? And then you try to talk them back into, oh, give me one more chance. Give me one more chance. Doesn't work that way. If you come in and you find something moving, something happening, no rational person says that it happened by itself, that it's self-initiated. They don't. And if you do, you're either nuts or you're dishonest. Okay? So the universe, these 3 laws assert that the agent or agents that created the universe are not finite like the created universe, but by necessary logic are greater and perhaps infinite. They are not temporary, subject to time, but eternal. Not dependent members. Let's type something on here just a second. Oh, they are not dependent members of the universe, but causers of the matter, energy, and time which comprises the existing universe. That's what the science says. Now, if the science says that, and the science says, and there's much more than this, but we can't stay longer than this in this 4 or 5 session deal we're doing. All right, if you know that there is some being, some person, some group of beings, some force out there that has this kind of power and this kind of control, what is the next logical question? Who is he? All of science says there must be a greater supreme force that is not. All right, this logical proposition instigates a whole new set of truth questions and searches. And none of those, no matter how difficult, negate the evidence. All right, if there is a being or group of beings out there with that kind of power, what's the only intelligent thing to do? Try to find him. Try to connect with him. Here are the logical questions. Is it a personal or impersonal entity? That's a legitimate question. Is it intelligent or random and chaotic? Does it have a purpose for what it created? And has it ever communicated with its creation? Okay, it is only intelligent, okay, if you accept the first 3 laws. Even though there's plenty of big questions. Now, as we said when we say, or if you reject that something came from nothing, and you accept that this, whatever it is, this finite universe came from something, it's a legitimate question to say, what is that something? Now, depending on how we answer these questions, they're going to take us down a road of more truth. That's where we're going to start tomorrow night. Okay, is we'd like to know, is it intelligent? Is it personal? Does it have a purpose? Has it ever communicated with us? Now, okay, if it has that kind of power, is it rational to think, okay, that entity could do these things? It is. All right, now you can't just say, well, I'm just sure he did, or I believe he did. Truth always has a track record of evidence. It just does. It just does. How many people have tried to commit the perfect crime? How many have been successful? Very, very, very few. Okay, because a rational investigation will find true things. All right, so tomorrow night we're going to start looking at the evidence that either does or doesn't support this. Now we don't have to worry about this because all we're doing is looking for truth. We're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to fudge anything because we don't have to. We don't have to. All we have to do is ask questions, make hypotheses, and then look for evidence. Look for evidence. And if there's not any, then we abandon that one. But if it's there, if we're honest, then we go with it. The study of teleology is really kind of the most fun. It's the most fun. And you can go on for weeks and months and years, okay? And we'll have some clips, tomorrow, some of that. And we could spend hours doing ooh and ah over all kinds of cool little critters and things that are there, okay? We'll be asking these questions, okay, and then say, what does the reasonable mind think about this piece of evidence? Okay, I think as you put together the 7 areas we looked at, okay, leaving off the first one, the ontological, what happens is the evidence mounts. The evidence mounts, okay? And then it becomes overwhelming. And then the honest mind says, well, it may not be 100%, but what? It's the only thing that makes sense. Okay, I'll leave this as my favorite character of fiction is Sherlock Holmes. Anybody else really love Sherlock Holmes in here? Really like Sherlock Holmes. And he has so many great quotes. And of course, he's famous for deduction and for honest thinking, okay, looking at the evidence. All right, one of his axioms is when you have eliminated every other possibility, the one that remains, no matter how improbable, has to be the answer. Has to be the answer. I can't tell you how many times, in my 35 years of being a Sherlock Holmes nut, it has helped me in my daily life to figure stuff out. Okay? All right, God, okay, as we all know, as we go through this, we're going to see the evidence that God is an intelligent being. That he's not random, he's not chaotic. We're going to say, we're going to find that he is seeking a personal relationship. That he does have a purpose. That's what teleology is, the evidence of purpose, design, and order. Got some fun things to show you tomorrow and some little exercises we'll do that I think will really help you to see. We don't have to apologize, right, for a Santa Claus faith. We do not have a Santa Claus faith. It is not built on fantasy and deception and conning and doing this for your best interest. It is stuff that leaps off the pages of science and eventually history. All right, I think that's the only thing that's going to protect us, okay, as we go farther into a time, which may be a prolonged time, all right, when we're going to be subjected to ridicule. All right, that's the hardest thing to deal with. It's the hardest thing to deal with. It is Satan's greatest weapon against us. Right? The only way to beat it is with the truth. It's with facts. You will not be able to just buck yourself up. You will not be able to lay guilt trips on your children or grandchildren or your best friend or anybody else that, said, well, just forget all that and just believe in God anyway. That will not work. All right, God has given us, okay, the rationale to see that he makes sense and that he's real. And we'll pick up here tomorrow night. Thank you all very much.